It was the kind of morning that felt heavy before it even really started. Claire was standing right next to my son, Nathan, perfectly put together in a tailored blazer, looking like she'd just stepped out of a corporate board meeting in downtown Boston. "This is Maya's father, Nathan," she said, her voice smooth and practiced. "George. And I'm her mother." Then her eyes flicked toward me, accompanied by a quick, polite but distant smile. "Oh, and this is our nanny." The words hit like a sharp, invisible sting, cutting far deeper than I ever expected. Before I could force a polite smile to smooth things over, 6-year-old Maya scuffed her shoes, looked up with a deep frown, and shook her head. "George." "No, Mommy," she said, her voice ringing out so clearly that every parent in the classroom heard it. "Grandma isn't our nanny. Grandma is the reason I'm still here today." The room went dead silent. Claire's face lost all its color in a fraction of a second. Suddenly, every eye in the room was on me. "My name is Eleanor Vance." George. Up until that morning in Maya's kindergarten classroom, I had spent years convincing myself that real love doesn't need recognition. I'm 67 years old, a former professor of English literature at a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts. For 38 years, books and students were my entire life. George. I watched generation after generation of young people find themselves through reading, comforted anxious freshmen missing home, and wrote countless recommendation letters for hopeful graduates. I truly believed in the power of stories to heal, because I had seen it happen over and over again. When I retired, I thought my life would settle into a quiet, gentle rhythm. My husband, Arthur, and I had spent our final years together planning for the freedom ahead. We dreamed of buying a sleek Airstream trailer, taking Route 66 across the country, and visiting all the national parks we had only ever seen in the pages of National Geographic. Yellowstone, Zion, the Grand Canyon. In our kitchen drawer, we kept a stack of folded road maps, brochures with highlighted campsite reservations, and a long, handwritten list of places we wanted to explore together. Then, just 6 months before my official retirement, illness took him from me. Nothing prepares you for waking up next to an empty pillow. For nearly a year after Arthur passed, I moved through my own home like a ghost. Every single room felt like a reminder of what was gone. His reading glasses still sat on the side table by his favorite leather armchair. His Boston Red Sox coffee mug stayed on the top shelf in the kitchen because I couldn't bring myself to move it. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway sounded unnaturally loud in the silence. People at the memorial service told me time would heal everything. But time didn't make it easier. It just taught me how to carry the weight. Thankfully, I wasn't entirely on my own. My son, Nathan, called me on FaceTime almost every evening. Nathan had always been a kind, thoughtful boy. Growing up, while other kids in high school focused on social cliques, Nathan was the one who would carry his tray over to sit with the kid who was eating alone. When Arthur was sick, Nathan drove across Boston from Cambridge every single weekend, mowing the lawn and taking care of the house before I even had a chance to ask. He had inherited his father's gentle, steady heart. 5 years ago, when Nathan married Claire on a beach in Cape Cod, I truly believed he had found the partner who would make him happy for the rest of his life. Claire was sharp, confident, and fiercely ambitious. She worked as a senior marketing director at a fast-growing biopharmaceutical firm in Boston and had a presence that commanded every room she walked into. She was impeccably dressed, highly organized, and lived by a clear philosophy. With enough hard work, every problem has a practical solution. In the beginning, she was warm toward me. She asked for my Thanksgiving turkey recipe, invited me over for Sunday brunches, and checked in frequently after Arthur passed away. I genuinely felt like I hadn't just gained a daughter-in-law, but a daughter. Then Maya was born, and everything began to shift, just not in the way I had anticipated. When Maya was only 3 months old, Nathan landed a major promotion at his tech company, moving up to senior engineer. The higher salary was wonderful, but it came with endless overtime, early morning stand-ups, and late-night code reviews. At the same time, Claire was climbing rapidly at her own company. Porch. In a city where the cost of living was high and competition was intense, neither of them wanted to step back from their careers. On a rainy Thursday afternoon in late autumn, they came over to my house carrying takeout from my favorite Italian spot in the North End. Before they even said a word, I knew they were going to ask for something. Porch. Nathan had a nervous habit he picked up from Arthur. Whenever he had a difficult subject to bring up, he would rub the back of his neck. Sure enough, his hand went straight there. "Mom," he began carefully, measuring his words, "we need to ask you for a big favor." Claire reached across the table and took my hand. "We've looked at daycare after daycare," she said with a heavy sigh. Porch. The top-rated places with good staff have ridiculous waiting lists. At least a year and a half out, and honestly, the thought of leaving Maya with hourly workers we don't know just doesn't feel right. We only trust you." Nathan looked uncomfortable. "It's just for a little while," he added quickly. "Maybe 6 months or until she's old enough for a Montessori program." Porch. I looked over at the framed photo of Arthur on top of the piano. If he were standing there, I already knew what he would say. Family comes first, always. So I smiled. "You don't even have to ask." The relief on their faces was so immediate, it almost made me laugh. Claire stood up and gave me a tight, emotional hug. "I promise," she whispered, "we will never forget what you're doing for us." Porch. At the time, I believed every word. Holding on to that promise, I called the RV dealership, canceled the order on the Airstream, accepted the refunded deposit, and tucked those national park brochures deep inside a drawer. I didn't shed a tear, because in that moment, a newborn baby needed me far more than any scenic highway ever could. The new routine started the very next Monday. Porch. During those first few months, I arrived at their suburban home in Wellesley before sunrise. Nathan was usually already dressed in his suit, sipping black coffee while scanning work updates on his phone. Claire moved through the house like a hurricane, balancing presentation decks, MacBook chargers, and Maya's tiny diaper bag. The house ran on a state of highly controlled chaos. Porch. Then they would quickly kiss Maya on the forehead. Within minutes, the front door would click shut. The sound of the SUV engine would fade down the driveway, and the house would fall silent. That quiet space became our own little world. Maya was just an infant then. Porch. I learned every single one of her cries, her sleepy smiles, and the small gestures that meant she was hungry or simply wanted to be held. I rocked her through midnight fevers. I watched her take her very first steps across the thick rug in the living room. When she finally learned to say my name, tears filled my eyes. Porch. She couldn't pronounce grandma, so she proudly called me Gamma. For months, Gamma was my favorite word in the English language. As Maya grew, our days built a wonderful rhythm of their own. Every Tuesday, we walked to the local library for story time. Wednesdays were our baking days. Cinnamon apple pies in the fall, chocolate chip cookies in the winter. Porch. On Fridays, we built giant blanket forts in the living room, using heavy hardcover books as pillars, sitting inside to read together for hours. By the time she turned 5, Maya could recite entire picture books from memory. Sometimes she insisted on reading them back to me. Porch. Whenever she hit a tricky word, she would scrunch up her tiny nose, her big brown eyes looking just like Nathan's when he was a boy. "I'm getting really good at this, Gamma," she would say, proudly lifting her chin. "You certainly are, sweetheart," I'd answer. Those moments were the absolute highlight of my week. Porch. Every now and then, former colleagues from the college would run into me at Whole Foods and ask if I regretted giving up my retirement to become a full-time caregiver. My answer surprised even me. Not for a single second. I hadn't sacrificed my retirement. I was spending it on the person I loved most. Porch. Watching Maya grow didn't feel like a chore. It felt like a second chance at motherhood, without the stress of balancing tenure tracks and household chores, and with all the patience in the world to appreciate every ordinary afternoon. Porch. On evenings when Nathan came home exhausted from work, Maya would sprint into his arms like a little rocket, rattling off every detail of our day. We made a bird feeder. We planted tomatoes in the backyard. Grandma taught me a poem. Nathan would laugh, patting her head and say, "Sounds like you two had the best day." Claire would usually smile along. Porch. But over time, subtle shifts began to show up. Whenever neighbors or Claire's new acquaintances dropped by, her tone when introducing me would subtly change. "This is Eleanor," she would say, followed by a tiny pause, as if she were choosing her words very carefully. Sometimes she left it at my name. Other times she'd add, "She helps us out during the day." I chose to let it go. Porch. Words were just words, or so I tried to convince myself. Every afternoon, when Maya wrapped her arms around my waist and whispered, "I love you, Grandma," nothing else seemed to matter. I had no idea that those small pauses were just the beginning of a much larger shift. I assumed we were just a family navigating the hectic pace of modern life. Porch. I never dreamed that someone was quietly attempting to write me out of the story we were building together. People say change happens suddenly, but in my experience, it rarely does. Most of the time, it slips in quietly, disguised as tiny details. A different tone of voice, a delayed text message, a polite smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. Porch. Looking back, Claire didn't wake up one morning and decide to push me away. It happened inch by inch. The shift became noticeable after she earned a promotion to Senior Vice President of Marketing. That night, Nathan called me, practically glowing through the phone. "Mom, she got it! Claire got the promotion!" I could hear Claire laughing in the background. "That's wonderful," I replied warmly. "Porch. Tell her I'm so proud." A moment later, Claire took the phone. "Eleanor," she said, her voice full of excitement, "this changes everything." At the time, I assumed she meant financially, and in a way, she did. In less than a year, their lifestyle transformed. The practical family SUV in the garage was replaced by a top-tier luxury vehicle. Porch. Weekend dinners at local neighborhood spots turned into reservations at high-end steakhouses in downtown Boston. Their calendar quickly filled with high-profile social events, charity galas, private club gatherings, golf tournaments, and executive retreats. Nathan often joked that he needed a personal assistant just to keep up with Claire's schedule, and I laughed along with him. Porch. But beneath the surface, I noticed the people surrounding Claire were changing. Her new social circle wasn't cruel, they were just incredibly refined. Every conversation seemed to revolve around visible markers of status. Private school admission rates, vacation homes in Nantucket, investment portfolios, designer handbags, and exclusive club memberships. Porch. Even casual afternoon gatherings felt like quiet competitions over who took the most exotic European vacation, whose salary was higher, or whose child was enrolled in the top STEM coding camp. It wasn't my world. When I attended their events out of courtesy, I mostly sat quietly and listened. I had spent my life introducing students to classic literature, not analyzing high-end real estate values. Porch. Still, I enjoyed sitting in the shade, watching Maya play on the lawn with the other children. Then came an afternoon where a single conversation made my heart skip a beat. We were at a birthday party for one of Maya's classmates. A few stylish mothers stood near the edge of the lawn, sipping drinks while watching the kids chase bubbles. Porch. One woman wearing a tailored designer jacket turned to Claire with an admiring smile. "Claire, I honestly don't know how you do it. Balancing an executive workload while raising such a sweet girl. You're practically superwoman." Claire smiled gracefully. "It just takes a lot of organization," she said softly. Porch. Then her gaze drifted toward me for a split second before she added, "And of course, plenty of childcare support." The woman followed her gaze and gave me a friendly nod. "Oh, is she your nanny?" Before I could smile and introduce myself, Claire stepped in. "No," she said quickly, keeping her tone light and casual. She helps out around the house." Porch. The hesitation lasted less than a second, and no one else thought twice about it. But I heard it clearly. On the drive home, I tried to convince myself I was being overly sensitive. Maybe Claire just didn't want to explain complicated family dynamics in a quick, casual setting. Strangers didn't need our entire family history. I forced myself to put it out of my mind. Worch. A few weeks later, something similar happened. It was a summer company picnic hosted by Nathan's firm in Boston Public Garden, set under a large white tent. Children were running around the bouncy house while colleagues introduced their spouses and families. One of Nathan's co-workers walked over carrying a plate from the buffet. "You must be Nathan's mother," he said, offering a warm hand. Porch. Before I could answer, Claire walked up carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. She stepped in with a polished smile. "This is Eleanor." The man nodded politely. "Ah, so you're Maya's grandmother?" Claire let out a short laugh. "Well," she paused briefly, "she takes care of Maya during the week." The conversation moved on so fast that cutting in to correct her would have felt awkward and dramatic. Porch. So I stayed silent. That evening, Nathan noticed I was quieter than usual. "You okay, Mom?" I managed a faint smile. "I'm fine, just a little tired." He looked at me closely. "You sure?" The truth was right on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to ask him why Claire seemed uncomfortable acknowledging me as family in front of others, but I just nodded. Just getting older, I suppose. Porch. Avoiding conflict always felt easier. Confrontation was never my strength. Arthur used to joke about it. "Ellie, if someone stepped on your foot, you'd probably apologize to them for being in the way," he'd say with a laugh. Maybe he was right. Autumn arrived, and Maya officially started kindergarten at a local school. Every weekday morning, I held her hand as we walked to the entrance. Porch. Even though she felt big enough not to hold hands, she still held onto my fingers. "Promise you'll be right here after school?" "I promise. Don't forget." I could never forget. Her face would light up with a bright smile every single time. Those afternoons remained the absolute best part of my day. Porch. We'd stop by a neighborhood bakery, sometimes sharing a cinnamon roll, or walk through a nearby park collecting brightly colored autumn leaves. Maya had an endless stream of stories. Spelling tests, art projects, friends who shared crayons, and funny things her teacher said. Children share so much of their hearts without even realizing it. Then came a late afternoon in November. Porch. We were sitting by a quiet pond throwing breadcrumbs to the ducks when Maya suddenly went silent. That alone caught my attention. Quiet was unusual for her. She stared at the water for a long moment before asking in a small voice, "Grandma? What is it, sweetheart? Can I ask you something?" "Of course you can." She hesitated, her small fingers twisting together. "Did I do something wrong?" Porch. I turned toward her right away. "No, sweetie, absolutely not. Why would you think that?" "Are you sure?" "I am completely sure." She looked somewhat relieved, but her brow stayed furrowed. "Then, why doesn't Mommy call you Grandma anymore?" For a moment, the air left my lungs. "What do you mean, Maya?" "At home, she still says Grandma," Maya explained, shrugging her shoulders. Porch. But when other people are around, like her friends or people from work, she calls you something else. Like the helper or the sitter. I searched my mind for a gentle way to explain it to a 6-year-old. Sometimes, grown-ups use different words depending on where they are. Maya didn't look convinced. "But you're still my grandma, right?" "Always," I said softly, touching her cheek. Porch. "To the end of the universe." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I like Grandma better." "Me too." The conversation ended there, but while it was just a simple question to Maya, it felt like a heavy weight on my chest. I tossed and turned that night, replay after replay running through my mind. Children notice everything, not because they are suspicious, but because they are observant. Porch. Adults master the art of framing things, while children simply see reality as it is. Over the next few months, the pattern became undeniable. Porch. At Sunday morning church services, Claire introduced me to new parishioners as our childcare help. At a neighborhood block party, she referred to me as the sitter. At Maya's winter dance recital, she mentioned to a parent sitting nearby that I was the lady who helps with the schedule during the week. Every time, the word shifted slightly. Helper, caregiver, sitter. Porch. Never grandma, never family. I wondered if Nathan noticed. If he did, he never mentioned it. Maybe he thought titles weren't important, or perhaps he wanted to avoid a disagreement with Claire. Or maybe, like me, he was trying to convince himself it didn't matter. But words do matter. When used repeatedly, they shape how the world sees you. Porch. Eventually, people stopped asking if I was related to Maya. They simply assumed I was an employee hired by a wealthy family. One afternoon, while waiting outside Maya's dance class, another grandmother waiting for her granddaughter struck up a conversation. How long have you been nanny for their family? Do you manage just the one child? I froze for a second. Oh, I'm Porch. Before I could explain, she continued. My daughter is trying to hire someone right now. Finding reliable, educated help in Boston is nearly impossible these days. Good full-time support easily commands $80,000 a year plus benefits. You're fortunate to have a good placement. I could only offer a faint smile. Yes, I suppose so. Correcting her felt entirely too exhausting. Porch. Driving home that evening, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For the first time in years, a quiet question crossed my mind. When exactly had I stopped looking like a mother and started looking like an employee? I didn't have an answer, but deep down, a quiet pain was taking root. One I could no longer brush off as a simple misunderstanding. Porch. Even 6-year-old Maya had noticed her mother slowly rewriting our family story. Maya didn't understand why, and truth be told, neither did I. When people ask if I regret giving up my travel plans after Arthur passed, my answer remains no. Not because my efforts were always acknowledged, but because everything I did was done out of love. Still, small things add up over time. Porch. Just a few days before Maya showed me her scrapbook, a small moment occurred that made everything crystal clear. Children love bringing their school projects home, and Maya proudly displayed her drawings on the front of the refrigerator. One Friday afternoon, she burst through the door, waving a sheet of oversized construction paper. Grandma, look what I made! Porch. Let me see. Is this a new masterpiece? I asked, walking over with a smile. It's my family tree. She laid the paper flat on the kitchen island. At the very top, she had written my family in colorful crayon. Branching down were her hand-drawn figures. Porch. On the left were Mom and Dad, and on a main branch to the right was Grandma, alongside a drawing labeled Grandpa Arthur, complete with a small yellow halo, because as Maya explained, he watches over us from above. My eyes welled up. This is beautiful, sweetheart. Did your teacher give you a gold star? I got the biggest one, she beamed. Porch. Just then, Claire walked into the kitchen, her heels clicking on the tile. Seeing Maya's excitement, she walked over to look. Oh, what's this? She asked, picking up the sheet. My family tree? Claire studied it for a moment, her brow furrowing slightly. Maya, it looks like you put some of these in the wrong spot. Maya blinked. What's in the wrong spot? Porch. Well, maybe Grandma belongs on a separate branch, a little further down. Maya looked confused. Why? She has her own branch, and she lives right nearby. Claire gave a short, familiar laugh. I just mean that usually, you draw the people who live in your main house on the primary trunk first, the immediate family. You understand? Maya shook her head firmly. But Grandma's family. Porch. I know, sweetie, but... Claire sighed lightly. Teachers usually look for a specific layout on projects like this. I finally spoke up. It's completely fine, Claire. It's just how she sees her world. Maya looked back and forth between us. I like how it is. Claire's smile turned somewhat rigid. We'll just make a small, quick adjustment, okay? Just a tiny one. Porch. While Maya ran upstairs to wash her hands for a snack, I quietly put the drawing back on the counter. She worked really hard on that. I know, Claire said, avoiding my eyes. It's just a school assignment. No, I said softly. It's how she sees her family. For a few heavy seconds, neither of us said a word. The air felt thick with tension. Then, Claire picked up an eraser. Porch. Gently but firmly, she erased the line connecting me directly to Nathan and Maya. In its place, down in the bottom corner of the paper, she drew a smaller second branch and labeled it Grandma. There, she said, letting out a small breath as if resolving a minor issue. That makes much more sense now. I stood there watching in silence. Porch. I knew it wasn't really about a piece of construction paper or an elementary school project. It was about where I fit in her mind. Lower down, further away, set apart from the main picture. That night, I drove back to my empty house with a heavy heart. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet, the sound of the eraser lingering in my memory. Porch. Redrawing a line on paper took only a few seconds, but distancing a genuine family connection proved just as easy. A week later, things took an unavoidable turn. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon. Maya had just finished school, and I was waiting at the gate as usual. Porch. Carrying a backpack that looked a bit too big for her, she ran straight into my arms, holding a large purple folder decorated with glittery star stickers. "Grandma, I'm here! I see you! What do you have there, sweetie?" "It's a surprise." She pressed the folder tight against her jacket. "You can't open it until we get home." "Promise." I opened the car door for her, smiling. "Porch. I'll do my best to wait." "You have to. Rules are rules," she said seriously. "Teacher said surprises are special because you have to wait for them." "Your teacher sounds very wise," I replied, starting the car. The moment we stepped inside the house, Maya set her bag down and pointed toward the sofa. "Sit right there." I followed her instructions. Porch. She hurried upstairs and came back down a moment later, holding the purple folder with care. "It took me 2 whole weeks to finish this." She climbed up beside me on the couch. "Okay, you can open it now." Inside was a thick, handmade scrapbook. On the cover, written in colorful marker, were the words, "My favorite memories with Grandma." Little drawn hearts surrounded every letter. Porch. Before I even opened the first page, I felt a warmth in my chest. "Oh, sweetie," she leaned against my arm. "Turn the page." The first page showed 2 stick figures sitting under a large tree. One tiny with curly brown hair, the other with gray hair and a blue dress. Above them, she had written, "Grandma read books to me before I could even read words." I gave a soft laugh. "You remember that?" Porch. I remember everything. On the next page was a drawing of us baking in the kitchen. A tray full of brown circles filled the middle, with one cookie clearly missing before going into the oven. I pointed at it with a smile. "That's very accurate. Because you always let me sneak extra chocolate chips," she said proudly. Porch. Page after page, the scrapbook captured the years we had shared together. Apple picking in the autumn, building snowmen after the first winter storm, planting tomatoes in the spring, and feeding the ducks near the river in the summer. Beside every single drawing was a simple, clear label. Grandma. Not Eleanor, not the helper, not the sitter. Always, Grandma. Porch. That simple word meant more to me than anything. My eyes filled with tears. "I had no idea you remembered all of this." She looked up, surprised. "How could I forget?" I kissed the top of her head. "You make an old lady very happy." "You're not old," she declared, looking at me thoughtfully. "You're just Grandma." As I wiped away a tear, the page turned to the middle of the book. Porch. The style changed completely. The bright colors vanished, replaced by heavy gray and dark blue crayon strokes. Across the page was a detailed drawing of an ambulance with red flashing lights. A little girl lay in a hospital bed, and beside her stood a lady with gray hair, holding her hand tightly. At the top of the page, Maya had carefully written a single sentence. Porch. When I couldn't breathe, Grandma stayed right by my side. My heart hit a sudden standstill. The room around me seemed to drop into complete quiet, the steady hum of the kitchen refrigerator fading into the background. I hadn't let my mind go back to that day in months. It was the scariest moment of my entire life. Maya reached out her small hand, gently touching the paper. Porch. "I almost forgot what the ambulance looked like," she whispered softly. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I really wish you could completely forget that day." "I don't want to forget it," she said, her answer taking me completely by surprise. "You don't? Why?" I looked at her in wonder. She shook her head. "Because that was the day I knew you would never, ever leave me." Porch. Tears spilled over my eyelashes. "Oh, sweetie, I was really scared back then, she said, leaning in a little closer. I know. I was terrified too. I thought I was going to die. I wrapped her in a tight embrace. You were so brave, Maya. No, she smiled, resting her forehead against my shoulder. You were the brave one. George, she said it with such quiet simplicity, free of any dramatic flair, just absolute truth. After a quiet moment, she turned the page. It showed the aftermath at the hospital, the bursts of flowers people had brought, stuffed bears wearing medical ID bands, Nathan sitting beside the bed with red eyes, and Claire wiping away tears. George. The very last drawing was a portrait of our whole family, standing right outside Boston Children's Hospital on the day Maya was discharged. Above that final drawing, she had written, "Everyone was happy, because Grandma saved my life." My breath caught in my chest. Children don't always understand the weight of the words they choose, but to Maya, it wasn't a figure of speech. George. It was just a statement of fact. A thought suddenly struck me. Sweetheart, did your teacher see this? She nodded proudly. Yep, she loved it so much. And what did she say? She asked me why the whole book was filled with pictures of you, but didn't have any of Mommy. My stomach did a slow, heavy drop, a deep sense of dread creeping in. And what did you tell her? George. I said it's because Grandma takes care of me every single day, and Grandma is always right here with me. She blinked her big, innocent eyes. I looked right at her and told her that Grandma saved my life. A cold chill ran straight down my spine. How did your teacher react? Maya shrugged her shoulders. She looked super surprised. I guess she didn't know about any of it. George. How could she have known? It wasn't just her teacher. Hardly anyone knew anymore. A memory that had once been on everyone's lips, filled with deep gratitude, had been quietly filtered out of our family's public narrative over the past year. It was as if it had never happened at all. As if someone had buried it deep down just to protect a flawless image of having it all seamlessly under control. George. I gently closed the scrapbook. This is the best school project I've ever made, Maya said, her eyes bright with excitement. And it might be the best gift I have ever received, I said, holding her close. Right then, the front door unlocked and opened. Nathan walked in, carrying his leather briefcase. Good evening, ladies. Daddy. George. Come look. Maya jumped off the couch and ran toward him, holding up her folder. Nathan chuckled and sat down next to me on the sofa. Let's see what our resident artist created. As Maya turned through the pages one by one, the smile on Nathan's face grew wider. Oh, I remember this one. We were at the orchard. George. Oh man, I completely forgot about telling ghost stories in the tent when the power went out. Then, he turned to the page with the drawing of the ambulance. The smile on Nathan's face vanished instantly. He stared down at the paper, frozen for seconds without saying a word. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Maya picked up on her father's change in mood right away. George. She extended a tiny finger, pointing at the crying man in the drawing. Do you remember? You cried that day. Nathan swallowed hard, his motions slow and forced. Yeah, I remember, I cried. And you hugged Grandma. I did. You said back then that we could never thank Grandma enough. Nathan turned his head, his eyes meeting mine. In that brief second, I saw the quiet conflict behind his eyes. George. I saw the person he used to be, the son filled with deep appreciation, the father who adored his daughter, the young dad who had been terrified of losing everything. He reached out and took my hand in his. His voice sounded raw and raspy. This is a really beautiful scrapbook, Maya. Maya offered a bright, beaming smile. George. Next week is Family Appreciation Day at school, and I'm going to bring it in to show everyone. Nathan forced a faint smile to his lips. I think everyone is going to love it. I managed a small smile of my own, but I could feel his palm getting slightly damp against my hand. George. We both knew that once this innocent scrapbook was presented in front of all the parents, it would lay bare the smooth narrative that had been carefully maintained for 2 years. A truth that had been quietly set aside was about to step right back into the light, completely unvarnished. George. There are moments in life that divide your entire history into 2 distinct parts. Everything that came before and everything that followed. For our family, that clear line was drawn on a bitterly cold Saturday afternoon in late November. Even now, years down the road, I can still picture every detail of that day with painful clarity. Porch. The warm scent of cinnamon and nutmeg lingering in the kitchen. The local Boston News anchor warning of icy rain heading into the evening. And the sound of Maya's soft laughter as she built a makeshift fort in the living room, out of couch cushions and woven blankets. None of us had any idea that in less than an hour our entire world would be turned upside down. Porch. That weekend, Nathan and Claire had been invited to a luxury resort in Stowe, Vermont, for a regional leadership summit for executives. It wasn't entirely a getaway. Claire was scheduled to give a presentation on digital marketing strategy to several executive directors, while Nathan planned to attend a few panels on technology investments. They had been hesitant to go, knowing it meant staying overnight and leaving Maya behind. "I still feel a little uneasy about heading out," Nathan admitted, as he loaded their Toomey suitcases into the trunk of the Porsche, the sharp New England wind turning the tip of his nose red. I smiled, helping him tuck the collar of his wool coat tight against the cold. "Don't worry about a thing. By the time you get back tomorrow, she'll probably be completely spoiled." Maya popped her head out from the porch and chimed in loudly, "Grandma said I can have sweet crepes for dinner tonight." I put a hand over my mouth in mock surprise. "That was supposed to be our secret, and it's only a one-time treat." "2 times, Maya corrected gently. Nathan couldn't help but grin. "I'm going to take Maya's word on this one." Claire stepped down the walkway, leaning over to press a quick kiss onto Maya's forehead before zip-up jacket was secured. "We'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Be a good girl and listen to Grandma, okay?" "I'm always good," Maya declared with total confidence. Claire stood up and turned toward me. Back then, her eyes held an open, unguarded appreciation. "Eleanor, thank you again for staying. I really don't know what we would do without you." Those exact words would echo through my mind like a quiet shadow in the years that followed. By 10 in the morning, their car had pulled away down the drive. Maya and I settled into our familiar weekend rhythm. We spent the better part of the morning in the kitchen, making gingerbread figures. Flour somehow dusted the hardwood floors, and bits of icing ended up in Maya's dark curls, but neither of us minded the mess. After a simple sandwich for lunch, the cold rain began to hit the wide bay windows with a steady tap. We curled up on the living room sofa to watch a classic animated movie, everything feeling warm, cozy, and completely ordinary. Around 3 in the afternoon, Maya mentioned she was getting a little hungry and wanted a snack. "Can I have some peanut butter sandwich crackers?" she asked. I gave a warm smile and stood up. "Coming right up, little princess." It was a perfectly normal request. They were organic whole wheat crackers that Nathan and Claire bought regularly from Whole Foods. Maya had severe allergies to certain tree nuts, like walnuts, almonds, and cashews. But peanuts are legumes, and she had eaten peanut butter since she was little with zero issues. She had eaten those exact crackers dozens of times before. I spread a thin layer of organic peanut butter onto a few crackers and brought the small plate back over to the living room. She took them with a bright thank you and began nibbling away like a happy little squirrel. I turned around and headed back toward the kitchen to brew a quick cup of Earl Grey tea. Barely 2 minutes had passed. Then I heard it. It wasn't a cry or a scream. It was a strange, wet, raspy cough that sent an immediate chill down my back. At first, I thought a crumb had just gone down the wrong pipe. "Maya?" I called out from the hallway. There was no answer. Then came a second cough, much harsher this time, followed by a sharp, strident wheeze. My stomach dropped instantly, an instinctual alarm ringing through my mind. I rushed back into the living room. Maya wasn't sitting on the couch anymore. She was standing near the coffee table, her half-eaten cracker dropped on the rug. Her tiny hands were clutching at her throat, her little body bent forward. Her breathing sounded entirely wrong. high-pitched, shallow, and terribly strained, as if drawing in air took every ounce of strength she possessed. Her eyes were wide, filled with sudden overwhelming terror. "Grandma!" The word barely scraped out from between her darkening lips. "George." I reached her in 2 strides, dropping to my knees. "Maya!" She tried to take another breath, but all that came out was a faint gasping sound. The color was draining from her face at a terrifying speed, a pale bluish tint forming around her lips. In that single fraction of a second, every protective instinct inside me woke up. George. People later called it quick thinking, but it wasn't abstract thinking. It was a painful memory taking over. Years ago, Arthur had suffered a sudden, severe bout of anaphylaxis after taking a new prescription medication. I still remembered the grave look on the ear doctor's face as he explained the warning signs to me. Blocked airways, rapid swelling, drop in blood pressure, and swift progression. George. In these situations, every single minute determines the outcome. Those words felt burned into my memory. I cupped Maya's face to look at her closely. Her features were already shifting, noticeable swelling rising around her lips and eyelids. Faint red blotches were rapidly spreading down her neck, toward her chin. "Oh, sweet Lord, baby, I can't." George. "Breathe." She looked at me, her eyes wide with panic. "I know, sweetie. Grandma's right here. Don't be scared." I kept one arm supporting her unsteady body while my other hand grabbed the cordless phone off the side table, my fingers trembling as I punched in 911. The dispatcher picked up immediately. 911, what is your emergency? George. "My granddaughter is having a severe allergic reaction," I said, forcing my voice to stay as steady as humanly possible. "We are at 42 Oak Ridge Road in Wellesley. Is she conscious? Yes. Is she breathing? Barely. Her airway is closing fast." The dispatcher began delivering instructions in a calm, practiced voice, but right at that moment a vivid memory flashed through my mind. George. Months earlier, Claire had mentioned in passing that after confirming Maya's tree nut allergy, her pediatrician had prescribed an epinephrine auto-injector to keep on hand just in case. I remembered exactly where Claire had put it, in the upper right cabinet above the kitchen island, stored inside a small white emergency kit with a Red Cross label. "I have an EpiPen here," I shouted into the phone. George. "Administer it immediately," the dispatcher ordered without hesitation. I lifted Maya into my arms and sprinted to the kitchen, laying her down flat on the wide floorboards. Time felt like it turned into thick glue, every second dragging out painfully. My fingers shook as I yanked open the cabinet door. "Please let it be there. Please." The white box sat right where my memory told me it would be. George. I snatched it, tore open the container, pulled out the auto-injector, and pulled off the safety cap. The dispatcher stayed on the line, calmly guiding the steps, but thank goodness I had rehearsed those instructions in my head 100 times over the years. "Maya," I knelt right beside her, looking into her eyes as they struggled to stay focused from the lack of oxygen. "George, this is going to sting for a second, but it's going to help you breathe." She gave a faint, fragile blink. I held the injector firm against the outer muscle of her thigh, right through her denim pants, and pressed down hard. A loud click echoed through the quiet room. I held it firmly in place, counting out 3 long seconds in my head. George. The moment I pulled the device away, I gathered her tightly into my arms. "It's okay, sweetie. It's okay now." I kissed her forehead, which was damp with cold sweat. Epinephrine takes a moment to work, and her breathing still sounded ragged and terrifying, like someone trying to draw air underwater. The dispatcher's voice came through the speaker. "The ambulance is 3 minutes out." George. "You did a wonderful job, ma'am." 3 minutes. In a moment like that, 3 minutes feels like an eternity. I kept running my hand gently up and down her back, speaking softly into her ear. "Stay right here with Grandma, okay? Don't close your eyes." She nodded faintly, taking short, gasping breaths. "Look right at me." She forced her heavy eyelids open, keeping her gaze locked on mine. "George. That's my brave girl." A quiet tear slid down her pale cheek. "Grandma. I was so scared." "I know." I held her closer, my own voice shaking. I was too. I couldn't lie to her. In that moment, I had been completely terrified myself. Finally, the faint sound of wailing sirens broke through the afternoon rain, growing louder as the vehicle sped down the residential street. Porch. I swear I had never heard a more welcome sound in my entire life. A team of paramedics rushed through the front door carrying heavy medical bags. Moving with practiced speed, they took over immediately, checking Maya's vital signs and placing an oxygen mask over her face. One of the senior paramedics spotted the spent auto-injector lying on the floor. "Who administered the shot?" he called out. "Porch." "I did," I answered, stepping forward. He looked at me intently for a second, giving a sharp nod. "Good work. You likely saved her life today." I couldn't even process those words at the time. Without a second thought, I climbed into the back of the ambulance right beside them. "We're taking her straight to Boston Children's Hospital," one of them said. "Porch. I'm coming with you." Nobody tried to stop me. As the ambulance sped through the streets, one paramedic monitored Maya's heart rate and oxygen levels while another began asking questions. "Do you know what triggered it?" "I don't know." "Any known allergies?" "Tree nuts." But she definitely didn't have any nuts today. "What did she eat specifically?" I retraced the afternoon in my head. Porch. Toast, apple slices, milk, and some peanut butter sandwich crackers. A sudden realization struck me like a flash of lightning. The crackers. I looked up, my eyes wide. They were a new brand of organic whole wheat crackers they recently bought. The paramedic noted it down. "We'll have the hospital lab check into it." Porch. We found out later that the facility manufacturing those new healthy crackers also processed almond flour and cashew butter on the same line. On the very bottom of the packaging, in microscopic font beneath the nutrition facts, was a tiny warning. "Manufactured in a facility that also processes tree nuts." A single overlooked detail on a label. A tiny trace of cross-contamination. Porch. That was all it took. By the time we pulled up to the emergency bay at Boston Children's Hospital, staff had already managed to contact Nathan and Claire. Driving back from Vermont through icy roads and heavy traffic, it took them nearly 3 hours to finally burst through the emergency room doors. I will never forget the look on Nathan's face when he arrived. Porch. He pushed through the automatic sliding doors looking completely shattered, his tie askew, his hair damp from the rain clinging to his forehead. "Where is Maya? Where's my daughter?" A nurse led them back to the room. Porch. When Nathan saw Maya lying in the hospital bed, an oxygen line resting under her nose, her chest rising and falling steadily as monitors beeped softly in the background. Asleep but with healthy color returned to her cheeks. His knees visibly gave out. He dropped heavy into the chair beside the bed, buried his face in his hands, and began to sob uncontrollably. Porch. It wasn't a quiet cry, but the desperate, overwhelming release of a father who thought he had almost lost his entire world, coming out all at once. Claire stood frozen at the foot of the bed. She stared at the green numbers, jumping on the monitor, looked down at Maya, and then turned her gaze slowly toward me. Finally, in a tight, cracked whisper, she asked, What happened?" Porch. The attending physician walked in a few minutes later. He was a senior emergency specialist in his 50s, carrying a quiet authority that instantly settled the room. He explained the mechanics of acute anaphylaxis and how terrifyingly fast an airway can close. When he finished, he paused, looking directly at me for a moment. Porch. "The epinephrine was administered with incredible timing," the doctor said, turning back to Nathan and Claire with a serious expression. "I'll be frank with you. Given how fast this specific reaction was progressing, if your mother had hesitated for even a moment, if she hadn't recognized the signs immediately and acted, delaying by even 15 to 20 minutes. He left the sentence unfinished. Porch. He didn't need to complete it. The dark reality hung clearly in the quiet space of the room. Claire suddenly covered her mouth with both hands, letting out a sharp, choked sob. Then she turned around and walked straight over to me. Without saying a single word, she wrapped her arms around me and held on tightly. porch. She held me so close I could barely draw a full breath, burying her face against my shoulder, her tears soaking into my sweater. "You saved her," her voice broke entirely. "You saved our little girl. You saved my life." I wrapped my arms around her in return, and my own tears finally fell. All the terror, the cold adrenaline, and the tight knot in my chest completely dissolved. Porch. Nothing else mattered. Maya was safe and alive. That was all that counted. Late that night, when Maya finally woke up, weak but offering a tiny smile as she asked for water, Nathan walked over to the corner where I was sitting. A 40-year-old executive who led teams at a major tech company dropped to his knees right in front of his mother. Porch. He took my hands in his, resting his forehead against my knees. "Mom, I will never, ever be able to repay you for what you did today." I gently stroked the graying hair near his temples. "You don't owe me a thing, Nathan. I owe you everything." I smiled through my tears. "No, just give Maya a wonderful life." "I promise," he said, nodding firmly. "I promise." Porch. Sitting beside my granddaughter's hospital bed, surrounded by the family I loved more than anything, I truly believed that moment would stay with us forever. I believed that a gratitude forged through such a close encounter with loss would never fade away. I believed some moments were so profound, they became an unspoken pillar of a family's bond. Porch. How could I have known that as time passed, that very gratitude would slowly be crowded out by something as superficial as social status? Or that the quiet little girl sleeping peacefully between us would one day be the only one with the quiet courage to remind everyone of the truth? During the first few months after Maya came home from the hospital, our family felt closer than it ever had before. Porch. Fear has a way of stripping away pretense, leaving behind only what actually matters. Nathan called me every single day on his way home from work, even if only for a quick 5 minutes. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" "I'm doing just fine, Nathan." "Are you sure? It rained last night. Are your joints acting up?" "I should be asking you that question. Were you up late working on code again?" Porch. He would offer a tired, warm chuckle. Then we'd talk about Maya, how her appetite was coming back, how her pediatrician had updated her emergency action plan, and how new auto-injectors were now stocked in every single room of the house, in Claire's bags, and in Nathan's car. Porch. Every single call ended the exact same way. "Thank you, Mom." Sometimes Nathan said it, sometimes Claire would chime in over the speaker, and sometimes they said it together. I had never looked for credit or praise, but hearing those words made me feel like we were all standing guard over something precious together. Porch. The following weekend, Claire insisted on hosting a formal dinner at their house to express their thanks. The moment I walked through the door, before I even had a chance to take off my coat, Claire rushed over and wrapped me in a hug. "Eleanor." Her eyes instantly welled up with tears. "I had another nightmare last night, dreaming about that afternoon." I held her hands gently. "Porch. It's in the past now, Claire. Maya is safe." "No," she shook her head firmly. "I will never forget that day." She turned her head toward the dining room, where Maya was quietly coloring at the marble table. "I came so close to losing her." "You didn't. She's right here. Because of you," she said, her voice cracking again. Porch. Nathan walked over, wrapping an arm around Claire's waist while taking my hand in his. During those early months, neither of them tried to hide how vulnerable they had felt. Life felt genuinely different, warmer, kinder, and rooted in what mattered. Whenever friends or colleagues asked about Maya's scare, Nathan never hesitated to tell the full story. Porch. My mom recognized the signs of severe anaphylaxis right away. If she hadn't acted instantly, his voice would trail off, thick with emotion. People would look over at me with genuine respect. I was never comfortable with that kind of attention, usually offering the same quiet answer. Any grandmother would have done the exact same thing. Porch. Maybe that wasn't entirely true, but it was how I felt in my heart. Love doesn't measure risk. It just steps up when needed. Christmas arrived right on time after that eventful November. Boston was covered in a deep blanket of snow. turning the neighborhood into a winter landscape. Porch. Inside, the fireplace crackled quietly, and Arthur's favorite vintage glass ornaments hung from the tall fir tree in the living room. When it came time to open gifts, Nathan handed me a small, carefully wrapped box in iconic Tiffany blue. When I untied the white ribbon and opened the lid, I found a heavy sterling silver picture frame inside. Porch. Framed inside was that photograph, the one taken right outside the hospital doors on the day Maya was discharged. Engraved along the bottom edge of the silver frame, in delicate script, were 6 simple words. Our family's guardian angel. I stared down at the crisp lettering, a familiar warmth swelling behind my eyes. Porch. Claire walked over across the discarded wrapping paper on the floor and squeezed my hand. We wanted you to have this, to know that we will hold what you did in our hearts, always. Nathan gave a slow, deliberate nod. Always. Maya, wearing her red Christmas sweater, scrambled onto my lap. I picked the picture out myself. You? Did? I looked down at her with a soft smile. Porch. Yup. Her eyes crinkled with pride. I wanted everyone to remember forever. I pulled her close. I will treasure it forever. And I meant every word. To this day, that silver frame sits right on the middle shelf of my living room bookcase. Not because of the engraved words, but as a quiet reminder of how easily firm promises can lose their shine over time. Porch. The change began through the smallest possible cracks. As months turned into seasons, life naturally settled back into its busy forward motion. Nathan took on a major lead role on an AI initiative at his tech firm, which meant longer hours and constant travel. Porch. Claire scored a massive public relations success, handling a high-profile corporate merger, earning her a feature spread in a regional business magazine. Maya stayed healthy and active, her weekly schedule filling up with ballet, piano lessons, and weekend coding workshops. Conversations about that terrifying afternoon at the hospital grew fewer and farther between. Porch. That was only natural. Painful memories naturally recede as time moves on. I was glad for it, too. A young child's life should be filled with light and play, not weighed down by past fears. Yet subtle details began to shift in ways I couldn't quite ignore. One afternoon a few months later, Claire's new supervisor happened to stop by the house unannounced. Porch. Maya and I were in the kitchen baking blueberry muffins, the room filled with the warm scent of butter and baked fruit. The doorbell rang and Claire went to answer it. An impeccably dressed woman carrying a luxury gift basket stepped into the entryway. As they exchanged polite greetings, Maya ran over like a cheerful little bird. Porch. My grandma and I are making muffins, Maya said, pointing to a tiny smudge of flour on her nose. The supervisor smiled warmly, looking past the hallway toward where I stood. Oh, so that's Maya's grandmother. I held a mixing spoon in my hand, stepping forward with a polite smile, expecting Claire to introduce me with the same warmth she used to. Claire hesitated. Porch. There it was. That subtle, split-second pause I hadn't heard in a long time. Then, Claire smoothed her features into a polished, professional smile. Eleanor helps us out with things around the house during the week. The woman gave an understanding nod. That's wonderful. Having reliable help is such a blessing for working mothers. The moment passed as quickly as it came. Porch. I stood motionless in the kitchen doorway, the wooden spoon suddenly feeling heavy in my hand. I told myself not to overthink it. Maybe Claire hadn't caught what Maya said. Maybe in a sudden, unexpected professional interaction, she had simply reverted to a quick, neutral phrase that didn't require a long explanation. It wasn't worth making a fuss over. Porch. A few weeks later, another small incident occurred. Nathan invited a few senior engineers from his company over for a casual weekend barbecue in the backyard. The summer evening air was cool, and the grill gave off a rich aroma. When Maya politely accepted a napkin from one of the guests and said a clear, "Thank you, sir," the man turned to Nathan with an admiring smile. Porch. You two have done an incredible job raising her. Such great manners. Nathan smiled. Before he could respond, Maya announced proudly, Grandma taught me to always say please and thank you. A few people chuckled warmly. The guest turned toward me as I was brushing butter onto ears of corn near the table. So you're the grandmother behind this little angel? Porch. Nathan opened his mouth to speak, but Claire stepped in smoothly. She handles our childcare needs during the week, Claire offered. Not her grandmother. Not family. Just childcare. The words weren't hostile. In fact, they sounded entirely polite on the surface, but they had been carefully selected to strip away any personal connection or blood relation. Porch. The smile on Nathan's face stiffened for a second. He looked visibly uncomfortable, his eyes flicking over to me with a brief flash of regret, but he quickly shifted the conversation, inviting everyone to grab a cold drink from the cooler. I noticed his silence, yet I chose to say nothing. People use imprecise words all the time, don't they? Porch. Unfortunately, that pattern acted like a quiet, slow-moving tide, expanding over the coming months. Bit by bit, even the basic story of our day-to-day life was being quietly reframed. One late afternoon, I arrived early at the dance studio to pick Maya up from her ballet class. She was chatting excitedly with another little girl in a pink tutu. Porch. The girl's mother noticed me and walked over with a friendly smile. "You must be Maya's wonderful nanny," she said pleasantly. I blinked, opening my mouth to clarify. "Actually, Before I could finish, Maya cut in firmly. "No, she's my grandma." The mother looked flustered, her cheeks turning slightly red. "Oh goodness, I'm so sorry, I just assumed." Porch. "It's completely fine," I managed a small, reassuring smile. "People mix it up sometimes." As Maya and I walked out toward the parking lot, I kept my tone soft as I asked her, "Sweetheart, why did that lady think I was your nanny?" Maya kicked a tiny pebble along the pavement, answering casually, "Because that's what Mommy called you when she talked to her last week." Porch. I stopped right in my tracks, the cold autumn wind cutting straight through my coat. "What? Last week during class?" Maya looked up at me with complete innocence. "Mommy was talking to her, and she pointed over to where you were sitting and said, 'That's our hired sitter.' I told Mommy right then that you weren't a sitter." "And what did Mommy say?" My voice caught slightly in my throat. Porch. Maya thought about it for a second, her brows drawing together. "Mommy said it was just easier to explain it that way." Easier. There was that word again, hanging in the air like a quiet shadow. Porch. As if telling the straightforward truth took too much effort, or as if openly acknowledging that she relied on her mother-in-law, or taking pride in a family member, felt somehow inconvenient in the exclusive social circles she was navigating. Driving home that evening, a deep sense of fatigue settled over me. I wasn't angry, I was just tired. Porch. Tired of pretending that words didn't carry weight, tired of watching a life filled with daily devotion reduced to a transaction, and tired of convincing myself that things would magically reset tomorrow. A few days later, after dropping Maya off at school, I stopped by the local grocery store to pick up a few items. Porch. Over in the bakery aisle, a silver-haired gentleman and I reached for the last loaf of freshly baked sourdough at the exact same moment. We both laughed. "After you, ma'am," he said politely, stepping back. "Oh, please, go ahead." "I insist," he smiled, placing the loaf into my cart. While waiting in the checkout line, we struck up a brief, friendly conversation. Porch. He asked if I had any grandchildren. "One granddaughter." I couldn't help but smile whenever I spoke of Maya. "Do you get to see her often?" "Almost every day." "That is truly wonderful," the silver-haired gentleman said softly, offering a phrase so simple yet direct. "My daughter always says that grandparents are the roots of the family." All the way driving home, I kept thinking about that word. Porch. Roots. People rarely pause to admire the roots of a tree. In glittering social gatherings, people applaud the bright flowers, the lush leaves, and the abundant fruit, the things that represent promotions, salaries, luxury vehicles, and impressive titles. But the roots stay buried deep under the dirt, quiet and unseen. Porch. Yet if you try to sever them or deny their existence, the things that look so strong above ground will eventually tumble down. When Maya climbed into my car after school that afternoon, she was unusually quiet, holding a folded piece of paper tight against her chest. "What do you have there, sweetie?" "My permission slip." "Permission for what?" "George." "For Family Appreciation Day at school next week." Her eyes lit up. "Teacher said we can bring the person who is most special to us." A warm feeling filled my chest. "Oh? And who are you planning to bring?" She looked at me as if I had asked the silliest question in the world. "You, of course." I let out a quiet laugh, my eyes misting over. "I would love to come." "George, I already told my teacher," she beamed. Then she added something that made a quiet chill run down my back. "And I'm bringing my scrapbook, too." "The one you made?" "Yup." "Why do you want to bring that one?" "Because I want everyone to know why you're my favorite person in the whole world," Maya said with complete seriousness. "George." I smiled, gently patting her head, but deep down, a faint sense of unease began to grow. My mind flashed back to the drawing of the ambulance in the middle of that scrapbook, and the sentence carefully written above it. "Grandma saved my life." George. I had no idea then that this innocent scrapbook, carried by an entirely honest little girl, was about to lay bare every quiet omission of the past 2 years right in front of everyone. On the morning of Family Appreciation Day, Boston welcomed a rare, clear day of early spring. Porch. Sunlight spilled through my kitchen window onto the floor while I stood by the coffee maker, trying to settle a sudden flutter in my chest. I couldn't explain why I felt so nervous. It was just a routine event at a local preschool. Parents and grandparents gathering to hear children sing songs out of key, look at art projects, eat cupcakes, and drink juice. Porch. In a community filled with old New England history and tech executives, events like this were ordinary. Yet ever since Maya told me she was bringing that scrapbook, I had a quiet feeling that something meaningful was about to happen. Perhaps because children possess the strongest tool to cut through pretense. Pure, unvarnished honesty. Porch. At 8:30 in the morning, my phone rang right on schedule. "Good morning, Grandma." Maya's voice sounded as bright as ever. "Good morning, Sweet Pea. You didn't forget about today, right?" I could forget my own name before I forgot today. "Yay! I already packed the scrapbook in my bag." I could picture her proudly standing tall on the other end of the line. "Porch. And I have a big surprise for you." "Another surprise?" "Yes," she giggled. "You'll see when you get here. Children love creating surprises, while adults usually fear them." An hour later, I drove over to Nathan and Claire's house. Maya ran down the driveway to meet me, holding that purple scrapbook tight against her jacket as if it contained top-secret documents. "I have to hold it myself." "George, I promise I won't drop it." Nathan walked out right behind her. He looked worn out, dark circles under his eyes, evidence of another late night spent pushing through work projects. "Morning, Mom." He walked over and gave me a warm hug. "I'm so glad you could make it. I wouldn't miss it." George. A few minutes later, Claire stepped outside, looking polished as always in a tailored beige blazer, silk blouse, pearl earrings, and perfectly styled hair. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a corporate magazine. She offered a polite smile. "Good morning, Eleanor." "Good morning, Claire." She looked down at the scrapbook in Maya's arms. "Don't forget your project, Maya." "I didn't." George. Then, Claire added in a casual tone, "Just remember, sweetie, we don't need to share every single story from inside that book with everyone." Maya frowned slightly. "Why not?" Claire forced a light chuckle. "Some things are just private family moments." Maya looked genuinely confused. "But they really happened." For a brief second, Claire's expression looked stiff. "George. Things that really happened can still be private." Before the conversation grew tense, Nathan checked his watch. "We should head out. We don't want to be late." The school was only a 10-minute drive away. The parking lot was filled with luxury SUVs and sedans. Well-dressed parents walked toward the bright classrooms, held by the hands of excited children. Porch. The hallway walls were lined with colorful paper flowers and handprint art. The air smelled like crayons, glue, and fresh coffee. Maya's classroom was decorated for a party. Banners hung from the ceiling, artwork covered the back wall, and rows of mini chairs were arranged in the center of the room for visiting families. Maya's teacher, Mrs. Thompson, a woman with over 20 years of teaching experience and a warm, inviting smile, greeted everyone at the door. "We are so happy you're here," she said, shaking Nathan's hand, then Claire's. Finally, she turned to me with a smile. "You must be Eleanor." "I am. Maya talks about you every single day." Mrs. Thompson's smile deepened. I chuckled softly. "I hope it's mostly good things." "Almost entirely." Mrs. Thompson winked, while Maya covered her mouth to giggle. Parents began settling into the small chairs around the room. Attorneys, surgeons, tech founders, and business leaders. The room buzzed with polite, casual conversation. After a few minutes, Mrs. Thompson clapped her hands gently to gather everyone's attention. "Before the children perform the songs they've been practicing, we'd love for each family to do a quick introduction." Starting from the front row, parents stood up one by one. "Hi everyone, I'm Michael, Emma's dad. This is her grandmother, Susan. I'm Noah's aunt. His parents are out of town for work today." The introductions were simple, warm, and natural. Finally, it was our family's turn. Nathan stepped forward with his easy, approachable smile. "Hello everyone, I'm Nathan. I'm Maya's dad." Claire took a graceful step forward, composed and confident. "And I'm Claire, Maya's mother." Mrs. Thompson looked toward me with a warm, expectant smile. "And you are?" Before I could take a breath to answer, Claire stepped in with a smooth, practiced smile. "Oh," she gave a light, airy laugh. "She's just our babysitter." The entire room seemed to freeze. Even after 2 years of quiet evasions and subtle shifts, even after that frightening afternoon where I helped save Maya's life, even after giving all my time to this family, those words still landed like a cold weight, hitting with sudden, sharp force. A few parents offered polite nods. One grandmother gave an understanding look, as if making sense of why I wasn't dressed like the hostess. Someone softly muttered, "How nice of them to bring their babysitter along." No one in that room knew the truth. How could they? I lowered my eyes, my vision blurring slightly. For a painful moment, I seriously considered letting it pass. If I just smiled and kept quiet, the moment would quickly fade away. Then a clear, ringing voice cut straight through the quiet room. "No!" Dozens of eyes turned toward the sound. Maya was standing right beside her tiny red chair. She wasn't throwing a tantrum, nor was she crying. She didn't even look angry, just deeply, utterly confused. She shook her head firmly. "No, Mommy." Claire blinked rapidly, her composed smile freezing. "What, sweetie? Grandma isn't our babysitter." A few nervous, awkward chuckles scattered across the room. A flash of panic crossed Claire's eyes. Keeping her voice low, she murmured through tight lips, "Sweetheart, please don't. She isn't a sitter." Maya cut in, her voice clear and ringing out across the room. "She's my grandma." The classroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Claire quickly crouched down, trying to block the view of the other parents, whispering, "I know, honey, but earlier you said..." "I didn't say it wrong." That unfiltered, pure conviction of a 6-year-old gave Maya's words an unmistakable weight. Mrs. Thompson's smile faded into a look of quiet concern. Parents exchanged uneasy glances. Nathan stood completely frozen, like a statue. Maya held that purple scrapbook tight against her chest, looked around at all the adults in the room, and said the words that changed everything. "Grandma is the reason I'm still alive." Silence. Complete and total silence. Even the children whispering in the back row stopped talking. A father holding up a phone to record slowly lowered his arm. Mrs. Thompson's eyes widened in surprise. "Sweetheart, what do you mean?" Claire reached out anxiously to grab Maya's arm. "Maya, that's enough! Stop talking!" But Maya wasn't trying to cause a scene or embarrass anyone. In her world, the truth was simply the truth, and everyone deserved to know it. She sidestepped her mother's hand and flipped open the purple scrapbook right there. Skipping past the first few pages, she stopped on the drawing of the ambulance with its bright red lights, holding the book up high for the room to see. "Look, everyone look!" Maya pointed at the page. "My grandma saved me." Claire stood up abruptly, reaching for the book. Maya, Mrs. Orch. Thompson immediately stepped forward, raising a hand gently but firmly to stop Claire. It's all right, Claire, she said, kneeling down beside Maya. Maya, can you tell us what happened that day? Maya nodded. I ate something wrong and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. She pointed to the little figure painted in red. I was really, really scared. Orch. A quiet gasp rippled through the front row, parents leaning forward. My mommy and daddy weren't home. They were far away at a meeting, Maya continued. Grandma was staying with me at the house. She looked at me, then back at her teacher. Grandma called the ambulance right away. She turned the page, and then Grandma gave me a shot with a special medicine to save me. She turned another page. Orch. And then we went to the hospital, she offered a soft smile. The doctor said Grandma saved my life. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone whispered softly, "Oh my goodness." Mrs. Thompson stood up, her eyes moving past Maya to look directly at Nathan. Is this true? Nathan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were red, tears glistening at the edges. He gave a heavy nod. Orch. Yes, his voice rasped. Every word she says true. Claire stood frozen, all the color drained from her face. Nathan took a large step forward, moving into the center of the room. My mother recognized the signs of severe anaphylaxis before anyone else realized what was happening. He swallowed with difficulty, his throat working. Orch. The ear doctors told us later that if my mother had hesitated for even 15 minutes. His voice completely broke, tears running down his face. Our daughter wouldn't be standing here today. Soft, stifled tears could be heard around the room. Several mothers covered their mouths, while a grandfather nearby silently took off his glasses to wipe his eyes with a handkerchief. Mrs. Orch. Thompson looked at me, her eyes filled with quiet respect and warmth. You never mentioned any of this to us. I offered a quiet, weary smile. It wasn't something I felt the need to boast about. No, Nathan spoke up loudly, shaking his head. It's something everyone should know. He turned around, facing the parents in the room. I should have told people from the start. Orch. I should have corrected things whenever someone misunderstood. He turned back, looking straight at me. I'm so sorry, Mom. Tears streamed down his cheeks. I kept choosing the easy, simple way out instead of having an honest conversation. I let people believe a story that wasn't true. His words hung in the quiet classroom. Claire still hadn't said a word. Orch. She stared down at the open scrapbook on the table, staring at the ambulance drawn in crayon as if seeing it for the very first time. Maya looked between us, confused. What's wrong? She asked softly. Why is everyone looking so sad? I stepped forward, dropping to one knee in front of her. Nobody is sad because of you, sweetie. Orch. Did I do something wrong? She shrank back slightly, looking worried. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close into a long hug. No, you just told the truth. Mrs. Thompson wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, offering a warm smile. Yes, Maya. Orch. And sometimes, she looked around the room, her voice soft but carrying across the space. The truth helps adults remember what really matters in life. Around the room, several parents nodded thoughtfully. A father near the back slowly raised his hands, starting a soft, steady clap. Then a mother joined in. Then the grandfather who had taken off his glasses. Orch. Soon, every single person in that classroom, the professionals, the parents, the grandparents, stood up, their applause filling the room. I stood there, completely overcome by the moment, tears falling freely. Not because they were clapping for me, but because after 2 long years of feeling invisible, I was finally seen. Orch. And standing right beside me, holding that purple scrapbook tight against her chest, was a brave little girl who had done what none of the adults in the room had the courage to do. She simply told the truth. The applause lasted only a few moments, but the quiet that followed felt long and profound. Orch. After the truth was laid bare by the youngest person in the room, no one quite knew what to say next. Parents looked at one another, reflecting on what they had just witnessed. A few grandparents pulled tissues from their pockets to dry their eyes. Even the children sitting on the floor seemed to sense the quiet weight in the air, settling down without a sound. Porch. Maya simply stood beside me, holding her purple scrapbook firmly in both hands. She wasn't smiling, nor was she afraid, just a bit puzzled. In her mind, she had expected everyone to look at her drawing, nod, compliment her artwork, and move on to the next family's introduction. She hadn't anticipated the complex looks every adult in the room was giving us. Mrs. Porch. Thompson was the first to speak, her voice gentle and warm. Maya. Yes? You are so very lucky to have such a wonderful grandmother. Maya offered a bright smile. I know. Her straightforward, innocent answer brought a soft ripple of laughter through the room, easing the lingering tension. Mrs. Thompson stood up and turned to me. Eleanor, I've been teaching here for nearly 25 years. Porch. I've met many dedicated grandparents, but I have rarely heard a child speak with such absolute certainty about someone. She paused, her eyes misting over. You should be very proud. I looked down, a lump forming in my throat. Thank you. Right then, Nathan took a step forward. His face was still pale, his eyes bloodshot. Porch. For a second, he looked just like the terrified father sitting outside the pediatric ICU 2 years ago. Except this time, he wasn't afraid of losing his daughter. He was afraid of losing his integrity. He looked around the room, taking a deep breath. I need to say something. All whispers immediately ceased. I owe my mother an apology. Nathan looked at me, then shook his head. Porch. No, I owe her far more than that. His voice trembled uncontrollably. My mother wasn't just helping out with our daughter. She was raising her alongside us. Porch. While Claire and I spent 12-hour days at work, chasing promotions and career milestones, my mother was at home making Maya's lunches, teaching her to read, sitting by her bed through feverish nights, driving her to doctor appointments and dance classes, and helping with homework. He swallowed hard. Porch. And when my daughter stopped breathing, he paused for 5 long seconds, visibly pressing down a sob. When Maya went into shock, my mother didn't panic. She saved her. Another respectful silence settled over the room. Nathan let out a long breath. Afterward, the ER doctor told us clearly that if my mother had hesitated for even a moment, we might not have our daughter here today. Porch. At that, several parents wept openly. The silver-haired grandfather to our left silently wiped his glasses once more. Nathan continued, In private, I've thanked my mother 1,000 times. But over the last 2 years, he looked down at the floor. I stopped standing up for her in public. His voice grew quiet, heavy with self-reproach. Porch. Every time someone misconstrued her role in our family, I stayed silent. Every time she was referred to as the sitter or the help, I convinced myself with weak logic, telling myself it wasn't worth making things uncomfortable or causing a scene. I actually thought that was the mature way to handle things. He gave a bitter, self-deprecating laugh. I told myself I was keeping the peace. Porch. But the truth? He raised his eyes, looking directly into mine. Silence isn't peace, it was just cowardice. His words hit harder than I expected. Not because they were sharp, but because they were honest. Nathan walked right up to me, stopping just inches away. I'm so sorry, Mom, I let you down. I instinctively reached out to take his hand. Nathan, you don't have to do this here. Porch. No, he interrupted gently but firmly. I need to. Tears spilled over his eyes. You gave up your retirement plans, your travel, your own life for us. You gave Maya a childhood filled with love and security, and I let people believe you were just hired help. His voice broke completely. I am so ashamed of myself. In that moment, all my reserved composure washed away. Porch. Guided by a mother's instinct, I pulled him into a tight embrace. For the first time since Arthur's funeral, my son cried on my shoulder. Not as an executive leading teams, not as a father maintaining appearances, but simply as my boy. I was supposed to protect you, Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. I patted his broad back gently. You found your way back, Nathan. You found your courage. Porch. He looked up at me. It is never too late to tell the truth, I whispered. Around us, the classroom remained respectfully quiet. Then another unexpected voice spoke up. It was Mrs. Henderson, the woman from the charity gala who had once assumed I was the nanny. She stood up slowly from her chair, looking at me with genuine regret on her face. George, I remember meeting you at that event. Her voice held deep remorse. I asked how long you'd been working for the family. She took a breath. I am so sorry, Mrs. Vance. You don't need to apologize, Mrs. Henderson, I replied gently. You only knew what you were told. Mrs. Henderson turned her gaze toward Claire, her disappointment obvious and unhidden. Yes, I suppose we all just assumed. George. A few other parents who knew Claire nodded in quiet agreement. Another mother stood up. I always wondered why Maya talked about her grandmother constantly. I thought perhaps you lived right next door and dropped by every day. Another parent chimed in. My son came home one day and said Maya's grandma reads the best stories. I wondered about that. A soft, warm chuckle rippled through the room. George. Mrs. Thompson smiled. Now we all know why. Slowly, the attention shifted toward Claire. From the moment Maya had opened that scrapbook, Claire had stood frozen in place. Her composed, professional exterior had completely dissolved, replaced by a quiet, stunned shock. She stared down at the drawing of the ambulance on the table. Finally, her lips parted slightly. George. I never intended to. Her voice was barely a whisper. She swallowed hard, trying to gather her words. I never meant to hurt anyone. No one replied. The air felt heavy. She looked at me, then at Nathan, and finally down at Maya. She trailed off again. In a world that demanded total control and polished presentation, her usual corporate poise was completely useless. George. Maya walked over, reaching out a tiny hand to tug gently on her mother's sleeve. Mommy? Claire looked down, her eyes wide. What is it, sweetie? Why are you crying? Claire slowly dropped to one knee in front of her daughter, tears finally breaking through. Because Mommy made a really big mistake. What mistake? I forgot to say thank you. Maya tilted her head, confused. George. But you used to say thank you all the time. I did. Claire's voice trembled as she raised her eyes to look past Maya, meeting mine. I did. And then I stopped. A quiet, poignant stillness filled the room. Nathan walked over to Claire's side, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Claire leaned slightly into him. George. For the first time in 5 years, the confident woman who always knew what to say looked completely lost. Mrs. Thompson cleared her throat softly, stepping in with warmth. I think, she said with a gentle smile, before we begin our songs today, there is someone who deserves our recognition. She turned to me. George. Eleanor Vance, you have reminded all of us that love isn't measured by titles or status. Love is measured by what we are willing to do for those we care about. She turned to the children. Class, can we all say, thank you, Grandma Eleanor? Nearly 20 young voices chimed together in unison. Thank you, Grandma Eleanor. I covered my mouth with both hands. George. The quiet tears I had held back for 2 long years finally fell freely. Maya offered a proud smile beside me. I told you everyone would love the scrapbook. I laughed through my tears. I think you were right, sweet pea. She wrapped her arms tight around my waist. I always tell the truth. Yes, you do. I leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her head. You really do. George. As the children lined up to sing under their teacher's guidance, Nathan leaned down to whisper in my ear. For years, I thought my biggest mistake was staying silent, he said, watching Maya stand with her classmates. Wasn't it? Not entirely. He shook his head softly. My biggest mistake was forgetting that children remember everything. I followed his gaze. George. Maya was back by her chair, giggling with the boy beside her, as if nothing extraordinary had just happened. Because to her, nothing extraordinary had. She hadn't set out to expose anyone or cause embarrassment. She simply refused to let the person she loved be erased from her life story. Watching her stand proudly among her friends, a quiet realization washed over me. George. Adults often spend years maintaining careful pretense because it feels convenient or polished. But children hold on to the truth because it feels natural and real. Sometimes the smallest voice in the room carries the quiet honesty needed to remind everyone of what actually matters. In the days following Family Appreciation Day, a subtle shift settled over our home. Porch. It wasn't that people gossiped. The local community maintained polite boundaries and kept to themselves, nor did anyone confront Claire publicly. The real change happened quietly behind closed doors. A new kind of quiet entered our household. Before, the silence had been filled with careful avoidance and unsaid frustration. Now it felt reflective and deep. For a full week after the incident at school, Claire spoke very little to anyone outside of essential work matters. Nathan still called me every evening as usual. "How are you doing today, Mom?" "I'm doing well, Nathan." I paused. "How is Claire?" "She's very quiet," Nathan sighed. "I've never seen her like this. What's going on?" She keeps replaying that morning in her head. The classroom, the scrapbook, the things Maya said. Nathan hesitated. "I think she's finally listening to how her words sounded to everyone else." I said nothing. Some lessons are only learned in complete quiet. 3 days later, Nathan called again. "Mom, I'm here." "Claire is starting therapy," Nathan told me. I blinked in surprise. I had no idea she was planning on that. She usually plans her hair appointments down to the exact minute. She didn't. "Not until this week," Nathan said, sounding tired but hopeful. The therapist asked her just one question during her very first session. "What question?" Nathan took a deep breath. The therapist asked her, "Why was it so important to you that people didn't know your mother-in-law was helping you raise your daughter?" He gave a dry laugh. Claire couldn't answer. At least, not right away. Not with an honest answer. That single question seemed to dig deep into Claire's mind. According to Nathan, she spent the next few sessions trying to understand why the word nanny had become a safety net she felt compelled to hold on to. The answer, when it finally surfaced, shocked even her. About 2 weeks later, on a rainy Boston afternoon, my phone rang. Claire's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated for a second before picking up. "Hello?" There was a long pause on the line, just the faint sound of her breathing. Finally, she spoke. "Eleanor, I'm here. Do you have a few minutes?" "I do. Take your time." Another silence followed. Then, in a very soft voice, she said, "My therapist told me I need to stop talking about you." I couldn't help a faint smile. "That sounds a bit unusual." She said. Claire swallowed hard, "That until I start talking about myself, I will never understand what I actually did to you." I stayed quiet, listening. When she asked why I always introduced you as the nanny to strangers, I told her I didn't know. But she wouldn't accept that answer. What did she ask next? She asked me, "What were you actually afraid people would think of you?" After a long pause, Claire whispered, "I was terrified they would think I couldn't handle it all." I closed my eyes. There it was, the simple, painful, unvarnished truth. I spent years believing that a successful modern woman should be able to manage a rising career, motherhood, and a home without showing a single seam. She had to do everything. Claire let out a self-deprecating laugh over the phone. In my head, admitting I needed steady help from family felt like an absolute failure. It felt like admitting I wasn't enough. My mind went back to the day Maya was born. The moment Claire embraced me for the first time. The tears, the gratitude back then. None of it had been fake. But over time, surrounded by constant comparison and a fixation on appearances, genuine appreciation had slowly been crowded out by pride. My therapist asked another question. Claire's voice brought me back. "What was it?" She asked. "When did you start believing that needing help was something shameful to hide?" Claire's voice grew quieter. I knew the answer right away. She began to tell me about her childhood. Something she almost never spoke about. Claire had grown up in Greenwich, Connecticut, in a wealthy family where public image was treated as everything. Her father ran a commercial real estate firm, while her mother moved through local social circles, regularly hosting elegant charity dinners. In her memory, their home was always pristine, like a showroom. Dinners appeared entirely effortless, and everyone in family photos smiled like they belonged in a magazine spread. Mistakes were carefully concealed, and any sign of struggle was treated like a family flaw. Arguments behind closed doors didn't even start until guests drove away down the driveway. Porch. If someone helped us, Claire explained softly, her voice heavy, my parents acted as if they were strictly employees. Not family, not friends, just people hired to do a job, to maintain the appearance that our family was completely self-sufficient. Hearing that brought a quiet sadness over me, not for myself, but for Claire. Porch. Children don't invent those rigid expectations out of nowhere, they absorb them. My therapist asked if anyone helped raise me when I was little. Claire sniffled. I listened quietly. My grandmother. She began to cry softly. She basically raised me. My parents were always traveling for business. I loved my grandmother so much. Her breathing grew uneven. Porch. But when she passed away, I almost never spoke about her to anyone else. Do you know why? Why? Because she choked out. Whenever my parents introduced her to outsiders, they always called her the lady who stays home with the children. Never grandmother, never family. Just someone hired to watch the house. A cold chill ran through me. Patterns, family patterns move through generations like quiet shadows unless someone stops to notice them. My therapist said something I will never forget, Claire said, her voice filled with regret. What did she say? She said, you didn't erase Eleanor because you disliked her. You erased her because you were taught from a young age that relying on family makes you look weak. Claire broke down into heavy sobs on the other end of the line. I turned into my parents. No, I answered her gently but firmly. You just repeated what you were taught. There is a difference, she cried harder. I hurt you so deeply. Yes, you did. I hurt Maya. I paused before answering. Yes, I even hurt Nathan. Yes. A long silence followed. I don't deserve your forgiveness, Eleanor. I looked out my kitchen window at the spring rain tapping softly against the glass. Claire, you deserve the chance to become a better person. I don't even know where to start. One step at a time, simply by staying honest. She offered a quiet thank you before hanging up. A few weeks went by. Nathan told me later that therapy was changing Claire in ways neither of them expected. She stopped holding on to a rigid need for perfection, began acknowledging when she felt overwhelmed, and stopped pretending she had to manage every responsibility on her own. For the first time since Maya was born, when things got tough, she reached out to Nathan for support, instead of assuming she had to carry the entire load alone. One Saturday afternoon, while Claire was at an appointment, Nathan brought Maya over to my house. Maya chased butterflies in the garden out back, while Nathan and I sat side by side in the porch, rocking chairs. She's Ching, Nathan said, watching his daughter in the yard. I know, we spoke on the phone. He looked relieved. After that call, she came home. He gave a quiet, reflective smile. The very first thing she did was take down every framed family photo in the house. I looked at him, surprised. Why? Because she realized something. What? In that whole house, there wasn't a single photo displayed that included you. I sat in quiet realization. I hadn't even noticed, perhaps because I had unconsciously stopped looking for my own place in that home a long time ago. Nathan continued. She spent hours going through old photo albums and cloud backups. Do you know what she was looking for? What? Photos of you and Maya. There were literally hundreds of them, he offered a faint laugh, though his eyes looked heavy. Birthday parties, the pumpkin patch, library trips, school plays, Christmas mornings, baking together, Maya riding her first bike. You were there for every single milestone. He shook his head softly. She kept looking at them and asking herself, how did I manage to convince myself this woman was just a sitter? Neither of us spoke for a moment. Nathan stared out at the rose bushes Arthur had planted years ago. Do you know what hurts the most, Mom? What? I gradually stopped noticing it too. His voice carried deep regret. I allowed your place in our family to grow smaller without speaking up. I saw it happening, disliked it in my heart, but eventually, I just let it become the norm. I reached over, gently taking his hand in mine. Nathan, when small, wrong choices are made over and over, they start to look like everyday life. That's just human nature. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. George, I promise you, I will never let that happen again. For the first time in years, I believed him without a shadow of a doubt. After they left that evening, I walked over to the bookcase in my living room, looking at the silver picture frame engraved with "Our family's guardian angel." A quiet smile came over me. Perhaps I had never needed titles etched into silver. George. Perhaps all I had ever wanted was a visible, honest place within the family I loved. And now, someone was finally choosing to see things clearly. About a month after the incident at school, on a quiet Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. I had just finished watering the roses Arthur planted for our 25th anniversary. They were blooming vividly this year. George. Arthur used to say that roses reward patience, perhaps relationships do as well. I dried my hands on my apron and walked to the front door. When I opened it, Claire was standing on my porch alone. No designer handbag over her shoulder, no tailored blazer, no formal attire. Just a pair of casual jeans, a loose gray sweater, and virtually no makeup. George. She looked like an ordinary person, unvarnished and real. More than that, she looked deeply nervous. "Hi," her voice was barely above a whisper. "Hi, Claire. I know I should have called first, it's fine." She looked down at the fallen leaves near the steps. "I wasn't sure if you'd want to see me." I held open the screen door, stepping aside. "Come on in." George. She walked inside slowly, looking around the living room she knew so well. Arthur's photographs still sat on the mantel. The old piano stood near the window, and the silver hospital frame remained on the shelf. Her eyes rested on the frame for a moment. "I remember giving you that." "I know." She looked away softly. "I almost forgot." We sat down at the wooden kitchen table. George. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. I brewed 2 cups of Earl Grey tea. She held her mug with both hands without taking a sip. Finally, she reached into her bag. "I brought something for you." She placed a sealed envelope on the table. Written across the front in neat handwriting was my name. "You don't have to read it right now." "What is it?" "A letter." George. "I rewrote it 4 times," she gave a nervous chuckle. "The first 3 times, I kept trying to excuse my behavior between the lines, trying to make myself look better. Eventually, my therapist told me, 'Stop explaining and start taking responsibility.'" I gave a slow nod. Her hands trembled slightly as she clasped her fingers together. "Would you read it?" I opened the envelope. George. Inside were 3 pages of handwritten paper. I began to read silently. "Dear Eleanor T., for years I convinced myself that my choices weren't hurting anyone. I told myself I was just simplifying casual conversations, that titles didn't matter, and that everyone would understand eventually. Every single excuse was a lie. The truth is much harder to face. I felt ashamed of needing help." George. Instead of facing my own insecurities, I chose to slowly minimize the person who kept our daily lives running. "You gave up your retirement plans. You loved my daughter as if she were your own. Whenever our lives hit a crisis, you stood by us without hesitation. And I repaid your generosity by reducing your role to a job description." George. Looking back, what pains me most isn't just what I said, but what I took away. I took away your rightful place in our family narrative. I took away the recognition you deserved. I took away precious memories from Maya's childhood that should have been celebrated openly. And worst of all, I almost taught my daughter that appearances mattered more than genuine gratitude. George. Thankfully, she grew into the person I should have been. While I minimized your place, she stood up to defend you. I don't expect your forgiveness right away, but I hope that one day I can earn back your trust. Not by asking for it, but by proving I can be worthy of it. Thank you. Thank you for loving Maya even when I wasn't acting worthy of that love. George. Thank you for loving Nathan even when he failed to speak up. Most of all, thank you for saving my little girl. Claire, I read the final line, the kitchen falling completely silent. When I raised my eyes, tears were flowing freely down Claire's face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I know those words aren't enough." "No." I looked at her honestly. "They aren't." She nodded. "Arch. I know." There was no argument, no self-defense, no explanations. For the first time since I had known her, she accepted the truth without pretense. "I spent years trying to look like a perfect mother." She wiped her eyes with a napkin, "and somehow forgot that perfect mothers don't exist. They certainly don't. I thought being a successful woman meant doing everything entirely alone." Arch. I offered a quiet smile. "No one does everything alone. My therapist keeps asking me why accepting help felt so terrifying. What do you think, Eleanor?" I looked around the room filled with years of family history. "I think you mistook independence for isolation. You thought relying on family meant failure." She let out a soft laugh through her tears. "Arch. When really, it just meant I was incredibly fortunate." We sat in quiet for a moment. Finally, she met my eyes directly. "I miss you." The simple statement took me by surprise. "I don't mean missing you managing Maya's schedule," she clarified quickly, her breath catching. "I mean, I miss talking with you. I miss asking for your turkey recipe. I miss seeing you read poetry with Maya. Orch. I miss having another person in the house who brought genuine quiet and warmth." Her voice broke completely. "I pushed away someone who loved us without asking for anything in return." I reached across the wooden table, placing my hand gently over hers. "Do you know what hurt me most, Claire?" She gave a slow nod. "I think I do. It wasn't being called the sitter." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Orch. It really wasn't. What hurt most was realizing you believed my love could be reduced to a professional role." Fresh tears welled in her eyes. "I am so sorry, Eleanor. I know you are, and I believe you." She was weeping openly now. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were right away." "They won't go back," I said quietly. "We'll build something new instead." "What if, George, something new is better?" She looked at me with quiet hope. "I would be very glad to see that." She nodded. "Nathan packed some old boxes years ago, and I came across it while sorting things out. I thought you might like to have it." The pages were filled with Arthur's notes on every plant in our yard: dates, weather, bloom times, even little jokes scribbled in the margins. George. On one page he had written, "If Eleanor ever complains that she doesn't know how to tend the roses without me, remind her that she's the reason they bloomed in the first place." I let out a soft laugh, tears gathering in my eyes. Claire watched me anxiously. "Should I not have shown you?" Inside, she had carefully written, "George, thank you for teaching me that telling the truth is another way to love someone. Love, Maya." I closed the card slowly, those words resting quietly in my mind. She was right. The truth isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it makes us uneasy, exposes our missteps, or forces us to realize we haven't been acting like the person we wanted to be. George. Yet the truth offers something pretense never can: an opportunity to start fresh. Looking back, I no longer view this story as beginning on the day Claire called me just the sitter, nor ending with her apology. It began the moment a little girl decided that love deserved to be called by its true name, George. And it continues every Sunday evening, when 3 generations sit around the same table, laughing over burnt cookies, passing napkins, sharing old stories, and creating new memories together. I was never just a sitter, nor was I ever invisible. For a short time, a few people simply lost sight of how to see me clearly. Thanks to an honest child, they remembered. George. And because they remembered, our family stands stronger than it ever has before. Sometimes, the quietest voice in the room carries the truth that matters most. And sometimes, that very truth becomes the beginning of a brand new story.